Hello, I am Dr. Mirela Cerneanu, and I welcome you to the Wellness Optimizing Warrior MD podcast, the WOW MD podcast. I am not your typical wellness coach, and this is not a typical wellness podcast. Here, I'll discuss educational facts about health, hormones, intimacy, anti-aging, and beauty trends, all very hot topics, to empower you to make great choices when it comes to your health and to your body. I want you to go, wow, I did not know that. Or, wow, this is going to make a great difference for me. Our healthcare system is broken and it needs a revolution. You and I can start one today. I am willing to share my knowledge with the world if you're willing to listen. Let's get started. Welcome back to another episode of the Wellness Optimizing Warrior MD, the WOW MD podcast. I struggled a little bit with the title of this episode because there are a couple of messages I wanted to send into the universe with this specific series of 2 episodes. Number one, we really need to talk about autoimmunity because this is one of the scariest, possibly new epidemics that we're facing. And number 2, I wanted to make it clear that we know why autoimmunity happens. In a sense, even though modern medicine does not seem to know and still says autoimmunity disease has an unknown cause, or it's caused by an unknown process, which is an area of interesting research going on. So bottom line, there's a few messages that I wanted to send out into the universe to everybody who listens. We have an idea what causes autoimmunity, and we do know how to resolve it. And we do worry that autoimmunity is the new epidemic. So let me start by explaining what is an autoimmune disease and what is autoimmunity. When you are diagnosed with autoimmune disease, it means you have clinical manifestations, signs, and symptoms of a problem caused by antibodies that are attacking your own cells and tissues. When you have autoimmunity, it's different than having an autoimmune disease because the problem causing the autoimmunity has not necessarily become widespread and it's not clinically manifested. So actually signs and symptoms could be non-existent, and the antibody titers that are detectable are not really considered to be clinically significant by any physician that you'd go to see, a rheumatologist, a primary care physician, etc. For example, the antibodies for lupus, called anti-nuclear antibodies, also known as ANA antibodies, are present in many people who do not have any evidence of lupus. The level of antibody can be as low as a dilution of 40 or 80, 160, even 320. But the presence of these anti-nuclear antibodies does not automatically define lupus anymore because these antibodies are so prevalent. And when I speak of the dilution, it just means the titer of antibodies. And the lowest titer, it's 40, and then the titers kind of double up, 40, 80, 160, 320, 640, 1280, and so on and so forth. I actually had a patient who had an extremely high titer of antibodies for ANA, 1280, so I sent it to the rheumatologist, and the rheumatologist said, it's okay, don't worry about it, you do not have lupus. I didn't think it was okay, and I didn't think she had lupus, but that's the answer she got, and the mom, because the young woman was less than 18, they were both present at the appointment. The mom did not feel that this is something that she needs to worry about, so she hasn't continued care regarding this specific issue. There are other things the young girl is being seen for, but not this specific area, because she was told it doesn't matter. Well, I think it matters, and I think it matters enough to dedicate 2 podcast episodes to it, so please listen. So to summarize, we want to consider autoimmune disease a serious problem. We know autoimmune disease, it's a serious problem. And autoimmunity, it's actually a precursor for this serious problem. Many men and many women, specifically women, suffer from autoimmune illnesses. And to name a few, lupus, Hashimoto's, Graves' disease, Sjogren's syndrome or Zika syndrome, rheumatoid arthritis, also known as RA, ankylosing spondylitis, thrombocytopenia, myositis or dermatomyositis, psoriasis, inflammatory bowel disease, Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, celiac disease, myasthenia gravis, multiple sclerosis, Addison disease, severe adrenal insufficiency, also known as Addison disease, type 1 diabetes, autoimmune hepatitis, and the list can go on and on for a while. You might notice that the majority of these autoimmune illnesses attack and inflame specifically connective tissue, cartilage, joints, skin, muscles. Very few attack the thyroid or our circulating blood cells, our liver, maybe the pancreas, maybe our heart and lungs. The signs and symptoms are usually related to the tissue and the cells that are being attacked. So because the attack target is widespread throughout the body, the signs and symptoms might be very vague and might not necessarily point to a specific organ that is actually suffering unless you have obviously a severe problem, like a terrible rash, in which case you know something's attacking your skin, or moderate to severe widespread joint pain, in which case you know something is attacking your joints. In general, many who suffer from these autoimmune illnesses or autoimmunity will have a general sense of fatigue. They're very achy and very stiff. Sometimes there's significant pain affecting various joints, and many are possibly suffering from diffuse digestive issues like indigestion, heartburn, gas, maybe bouts of constipation alternating with bouts of diarrhea, frequently labeled as IBS. For the thyroid and autoimmune diseases that affect the thyroid, this is even more insidious or subtle because any signs or symptoms of a thyroid problem are constantly overlooked by many doctors as well as patients who do not realize there's a problem for many years. Our thyroid, which is one of the organs who is frequently the subject of an autoimmune assault caused by very specific antibodies like thyroid peroxidase antibodies, which are antibodies against the thyroid peroxidase enzyme, or thyroglobulin antibodies, which are specific antibodies against a thyroglobulin molecule within the thyroid, or thyroid stimulating antibodies, TIS antibodies, who can actually destroy the cellular gland by causing inflammation and stimulating the release of thyroid hormones. All of these antibodies destroy the thyroid gland. They cause inflammation of the tissues in the thyroid. Initially, a lot of them cause a significant release of thyroid hormones, which leads to hyperthyroidism or Graves' disease. But in a matter of years, if this assault is left untreated, it will eventually continue to destroy the thyroid gland, leading to thyroid insufficiency. And ultimately, there will be such severe deficiency, there is no functioning thyroid tissue anymore. And at this point, the patient will have to rely completely on thyroid replacement therapy. I will dedicate an entire podcast to thyroid, so I won't linger here, but please know that thyroid dysfunction is very common, and autoimmune thyroid dysfunction, it's really not a thyroid problem, but it manifests with thyroid symptoms. Please note that thyroid dysfunction, again, is very common, manifests subtly with fatigue, weight gain, dry skin, constipation, anxiety, depression, both anxiety and depression, achy and stiff joints, memory problems, focus issues, headaches, irregular periods, infertility, and many more signs. So let's go back to autoimmunity. How does autoimmunity happen? That is the million-dollar question. So if you ask any of the conventional medicine doctors, they will tell you that the exact cause of an autoimmune disorder is unknown. What is known and agreed upon is that women are much more prone to autoimmune disease than men. Why does nearly 80% of autoimmune disease happens in women? This is a very interesting question, and I want you to think about it, especially if you are a woman. And I'll come back to that later, even in my second episode. Functional medicine and anti-aging regenerative medicine doctors and researchers believe that the answer to why do we develop autoimmunity is pretty simple. It starts with a damaged intestinal barrier. Our intestinal lining is composed of a single cell layer, a very unique structure in the body. This is unlike anywhere else where a tissue or an organ, it's usually composed of many layers of cells. There are only 3 places in the body where this unique single cell layer barrier exists. Number 1, the intestinal lining. Number 2, the endothelium lining, that is the lining of all our blood vessels that exist in our body. And number 3, the blood-brain barrier, the connection between the blood and the brain. So interestingly enough, and please remember this, a damaged intestinal lining will cause and is defined or is known as leaky gut. A damaged endothelial lining will actually cause a leaky blood vessel, and a damaged blood-brain barrier will cause a leaky brain. All of these entities are extremely important, and you need to know that they exist. In today's podcast, I'm going to focus on the damaged intestinal lining causing leaky gut, a very widespread term that is not always accepted or trusted by conventional medicine practitioners. It's also known as intestinal hyperpermeability. So let's talk about this single cell layer entity and why is it so important for the health of our bodies. The intestinal lining in our gut is composed of a membrane with a single layer of cells. These cells have some very interesting connections between them, and these connections are called junctions. The integrity of this barrier relies on the tightness of the junctions between the cells. And the tightness of the junctions between the intestinal cells is crucial for our health. Think of this barrier as the only thing that stands between everything you put in your mouth and swallow, the gastric juices, including the acid juice of the stomach, between the bacteria that exist in our gut, between all the toxins and the contaminants that we ingest, and the inside of our bodies. This cell layer is all that stands between what we swallow through food and drink and what we put in our mouth and our internal environment. You can understand how the integrity of this structure is crucial for a healthy body. What's also interesting about this type of lining is that in spite of its apparent fragility, it's very fragile apparently because it's only one tiny cell layer thick. So technically it's very fragile. However, it has unique cellular junctions that are functioning as entities in as of itself, guarding the spillage of intestinal contents, guarding the spillage of food, of toxins, of gastric juices, of intestinal juices, guarding the spillage of bacteria from literally inside our gut, penetrating the barrier and gaining entry into our bodies. So it is fragile, but it's extremely strong. And it's fragile because it can easily be damaged. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. So as it turns out, it's extremely easy for this gut lining that is, as I mentioned, very fragile to get damaged. The main destroyer, damager, or attacker is actually stress. Numerous studies have shown and documented that this unique single cell layer that stands guard between our intestinal contents and the inside of our bodies gets seriously damaged by stress. The stress damages the cells, which are no longer able to absorb nutrients. And the stress also damages the junctions, which are no longer tight, allowing various large molecules to gain entry into our bloodstream, which is on the other side of this barrier. So, two things happen here. Number one, our intestinal cells are no longer able to absorb and allow transport of essential nutrients and vitamins into our bloodstream, which we need in order to nourish and provide energetic support for all the mitochondria in every cell of the body and for crucial essential functions, including normal hormones. Number two, once the gut barrier is damaged, it will also allow foreign molecules to penetrate this gut junction barrier and gain entry into our blood and bloodstream, which is the circulating blood. So what is in our bloodstream that is meant to defend us from invaders? You guessed, our immune system. So a significant theory that tries to explain autoimmunity involves the possible mechanism of how our immune system keeps being activated and it becomes dysfunctional, pathologically attacking self-tissue, our own tissue, wreaking havoc, destruction, and causing disease. Our immune system stands on guard to defend us at all times from any invaders. And it will be activated and it will create various types of responses as soon as it comes in contact with recognizable foreign antigens. In layman terms, it means every time one of these bacteria, viruses, parasites, toxins, undigested or digested food byproducts, particles that would be normally eliminated through the gut, but have now gained access to our bloodstream and become antigens, the immune system recognizes these as foreign and will mount an attack. I mentioned antigens. Don't want to leave you in the dark, so I'm going to give you a little educational material about the immune system. Antigens are molecules that are recognized as non-self, and they are considered invaders and foreign. Our body has an immune system that is built and genetically trained to attack, destroy, and eliminate all foreign invaders. So I will continue talking more about our immune system in the second part of this podcast, but I would like to come back to why this autoimmunity is predominantly happening in women. The conventional medicine theory obviously wants to blame it on our hormones. The thing that makes us different than men is that we have estrogen. And interestingly enough, we have super high levels during our childbearing years. So estrogen must predispose us to autoimmune disease because of all the extra estrogen. However, in my opinion, this is a really bad theory. There are many women who develop autoimmune disease at menopause, when their circulating estrogen levels are much lower or zero compared to childbearing years. And most of these women, and some of them, a significant amount, have no estrogen at all when they develop an autoimmune disease. More interestingly, women that develop autoimmune disease when they're young, during their reproductive years, when they should be flooded and have a lot of estrogen circulating, actually, interestingly enough, they are on birth control pills or birth control methods that significantly decrease their estrogen levels. So let's look for another reason. What would be another reason why women develop more autoimmune disease than men? Let's say it's not the estrogen, it's not the hormones. Well, maybe it's because they're much more prone to stress. They more likely to internalize, perpetuate, and suffer from stress? Apparently, yes. And this is a crucial thing to know. So let's talk about this a little bit more. If you Google this question, are women more prone to stress? The first entry at the top of the Google page states in a highlighted way that women are more likely to be stressed than men. The New York Times published an article in 2018 about the stress gap between men and women, citing a study published in 2016 in the Journal of Brain and Behavior, discussing how women are twice as likely to suffer from severe stress and anxiety when compared to men. Also, the same article mentions that the American Psychological Association reports that women consistently experience higher stress levels than men. So I came across an article published in 2019 in Times of India asking this question: do you know why women are more stressed than men? So in attempting to answer this question, the article points out that women are more sensitive. Women are not very good at letting go of a situation. Women's brains keep replaying the same event over and over again, which can contribute to depression and feelings of sadness. Also, women suffer pressure from different areas. They try to blend work, professional career, and family responsibilities, which makes their brain harder to focus, which would automatically be linked to increasing stress. You're hard to focus, you feel like you can't handle things, you're going to be more stressed. In attempting to answer why men are less stressed, the same article in Times of India points out the fact that men are more involved in action and planning rather than emotional processing. Also, when stressed, apparently men think of taking action on a particular situation, whereas women tend to cope with a stressful situation by primarily sharing their feelings with others. So basically, when men are hit with stress or faced with stress, they immediately kick into gear an action plan. I'm going to deal with this and fix it. Whereas women tend to go talk to their closest friend. They want to share the situation. They look for advice. They want to download their emotional participation and the emotional component of what the stress is doing to them. It's a possibility that that's how they're seeking relief from stress. So they're not necessarily action planners. they're more sharers. They share. So let me ask a simple question. What can a woman do to think and feel a little bit more like a man without losing her femininity? Is there a magic hormone that we possess, that we make plenty of in our bodies, that makes us balance our masculine and feminine side better? What is a hormone that can help reduce anxiety, alleviate depression, help stabilize our mood, decrease irritability, and ultimately help us women cope much better with stress? Well, you should know the answer if you had listened to my previous 2 podcasts. If you don't know the answer, please revisit the last 2 podcasts. We know as a fact that men, due to the presence of testosterone, are probably generally way more laid back than women. We know also as a fact that men with low testosterone have more depression, are much more irritable, and grumpier. We also know that women that use testosterone replacement therapy have better mood and are much less likely to be overwhelmed by stressors. So yes, the answer to my previous question is testosterone. Testosterone can be a magic hormone that can help us cope with stress a lot better. Let's think about the fact that women are more than twice as likely as men to develop anxiety or some form of anxiety disorder during their lifetime. So what specifically triggers anxiety in women? It's always the feeling of being overwhelmed. And this sensation is most likely to be a huge contributor to the emotional type of stress causing leaky gut. Leaky gut, first portal of entry, first initiator for autoimmunity. So again, everything in the body is tied in together. Nothing happens in a vacuum. So coming back to stress, let's not just blame it all on stress. There are many things that can cause leaky gut. And let's talk about these for a little bit. A poor diet, for example. Well, guess who, between a man or a woman, is more prone to have cravings, give in to cravings, and eat a poor diet? Well, you guessed. Women are much more prone to have cravings, especially for sweets. Processed foods contain a very high level of specific preservatives that impact the composition and diversity of our microbiome, our friendly bacteria that exist and populate our gut. These processed foods directly damage our gut lining, leading to inflammation and chronic disease. This link is very well established, and we know that women are much more prone to give in to cravings. But what about alcohol? Consistent use of alcohol will damage the gut lining. Historically, men have been much more likely than women to consume excess alcohol. However, research indicates that for the past decade, women are actually drinking more than men. So why are women drinking more than they used to? According to a professor of epidemiology at Columbia University, alcohol is being sold to women as part of a luxury lifestyle, as a way to reduce stress and to have a good time. In my practice, very often, women admit to drinking with dinner or after dinner to relax and be able to fall asleep. Interestingly enough, none of these women are young. Most of them are over 40. Likely, the decline in sex hormone levels impacts their mood and their ability to manage stress. So they drink more, which unfortunately leads to unnecessary calories, potential weight gain, and a damaged gut lining. More importantly, none of these women feel that drinking 2 glasses of wine every night is a problem or is considered an addiction. I remember a very interesting encounter with a client that came seeking laser therapy for vaginal rejuvenation. This woman was recovering from breast cancer and undergoing chemotherapy. Sex was impossible and painful, and that's the reason for the consultation. However, as part of my comprehensive evaluation, I asked about alcohol intake. When she replied that she's drinking 1 to 2 glasses of wine every night, I felt it was my duty and obligation as a good physician to point out that alcohol consumption is linked to increased risk of cancer. I pointed out that alcohol has to be processed by the liver at the same time with other toxins or problems, and the liver will ignore other toxins or other byproducts that need to be processed, increasing risk of accumulation of such toxins in the fat tissue, sometimes directly in the breast area, leading to an increased risk of cancer recurrence. She told me her cancer doctor told her there's nothing wrong with a few glasses of wine. I begged to differ, and I strongly expressed my opinion as I felt it was my duty to speak the truth and help protect her from further cancer. Unfortunately, she became frustrated with my difference of opinion. We finished the consultation as I backed off of the alcohol intake problem, but I never saw her again, and she never came to me to continue her vaginal rejuvenation because she most likely took it personally and didn't like my stance on alcohol intake. On the other hand, sometimes I point out the simple fact that 2 glasses of wine every night, instead of alleviating a problem, can actually cause a much more serious problem. And when I actually explain to my clients how and why consistent, steady use of alcohol can damage a woman's health, I've actually had patients reply to me, they never thought about it. But then after my conversation with them, they became committed to do something that affected the root cause of why they needed the alcohol rather than continue with the alcohol consumption. I specifically remember one day I was talking to my office staff at the reception desk, and a lovely lady was looking at our vitamin cabinet and wanted to say hello to me. And right then and there in the reception area, she wanted to thank me for how I drastically changed her life, because all I did was point out that the amount of alcohol she was consuming with dinner and after dinner was too much, and why it was not healthy for her. So she told me she quit drinking, lost 20 pounds, felt a huge increase in energy, had a great sleep and a much better mood, and her relationship with family and with her professional colleagues improved drastically. She was doing well in her career, and she was super thankful. I remembered her, and I honestly did not even remember addressing this issue with her. And at the start of the conversation, again, she just started thanking me. I thought I did something right regarding her hormones. As it turns out, at the end of the conversation, after she told me all the good things that happened, all it took was a simple lifestyle change. And my conversation about the alcohol intake drove it home for her. So again, alcohol, it's a problem. And there are 2 extremes of how a conversation regarding alcohol intake can go between a doctor and a patient. And there's lots of in-betweens. If you are drinking more than 1 to 2 glasses of wine and you're doing it on a daily basis, please think about how this might impact you and maybe ask your physician about their opinion. So let's go back to stress and why stress drives alcohol. We know that stress is a major driver to alcohol consumption, and this is a very simple fact underlined by how the sale of alcoholic beverages skyrocketed during the pandemic. When stressed, people drink alcohol to relax. Men and women likely drink for different reasons, and possibly women are drinking more than men because they're seeking a way to manage their stress, unfortunately and unknowingly causing further damage to their health. Also, smoking, environmental toxins, and pollutants are a major culprit, and they're damaging our gut lining. So it's not always just about stress. But think about this. Why do we need to drink? Why do we need to smoke? Why do we need to eat poorly? Why do we crave bad foods? And why do we so easily give in to eating and consuming the bad foods? The answer is because we are stressed. So no matter how we look at it, stress drives everything. And stress is also estimated to be the cause of 90% of chronic disease in the United States. I will end here this episode, but I will return next week and continue discussing our immune system and our immune system's role in autoimmunity and what are the possible solutions we have to reverse course and cure autoimmunity and autoimmune disease. Thank you, and I'll see you next week. If you liked the information you heard and you'd like to hear more, please subscribe and follow my podcast. Should you find the content helpful to not just you, but possibly others, please share it and feel free to leave us a review. You are welcome to join the Facebook group, The Warrior Optimizing Wellness MD. I certainly hope that you've heard many things in this podcast that made you go, wow, I did not know that, or wow, I'd like to know more. So keep listening and I'll keep talking.